Introduction. The search that never ends. There is a question hidden beneath almost every human life. A question rarely spoken aloud. A question that follows us through childhood, through ambition, through success, through relationships, and even into old age. It is the question behind every dream. The question behind every desire. The question behind every restless night. The question behind every goal we chase. The question is simple. What am I really looking for? Most people never ask it directly. Instead, they spend their lives answering it unconsciously. Some search through wealth. Some search through achievement. Some search through love. Some search through status. Some search through knowledge. Some search through spirituality. The paths appear different. Yet beneath them all lies the same longing. A longing to feel complete. A longing to arrive. A longing to discover something that finally brings peace. But there is a mystery hidden inside this search. Why is it that human beings achieve so much and yet remain restless? Why do people reach goals they once believed would change everything, only to discover another goal waiting beyond them? Why does fulfillment seem so close, yet remain just out of reach? Why do we keep running toward horizons that never seem to arrive? And perhaps the most important question of all: what if we have been looking in the wrong direction? This book was born from that question. Not as a philosophy. Not as a belief system. Not as another collection of comforting ideas. But as an investigation. A journey into one of the oldest mysteries of human existence. The mystery of why we search. The mystery of why we suffer. The mystery of why so many people spend their lives pursuing happiness without ever fully finding it. And the mystery of whether something entirely different has been waiting for us all along. Throughout these pages you will meet kings and wanderers, beggars and philosophers, students and teachers, dreamers and seekers. Some of their stories are ancient. Some are symbolic. Some are simple. Yet hidden inside each story is a mirror. A mirror that reflects something about your own life. Because this is not really a book about other people. It is a book about you. About the invisible forces shaping your choices. About the desires pulling your attention. About the hopes guiding your future. About the fears silently influencing your decisions. And about the possibility that beneath all of it lies something extraordinary. Perhaps you have already experienced moments that led you here. Moments when success failed to deliver what it promised. Moments when achieving a goal felt strangely incomplete. Moments when life seemed to whisper, "There must be more than this." Perhaps you have felt the exhaustion of constant striving. The pressure of becoming. The endless demand to accomplish, improve, optimize, compete, and achieve. Perhaps you have looked around and wondered why modern life moves faster than ever while peace seems harder to find. If so, you are not alone. Millions of people feel the same tension. A tension between outer success and inner fulfillment. A tension between having more and feeling whole. A tension between achievement and meaning. Yet few people stop long enough to investigate it. And that investigation changes everything. What you are about to discover is not a method for escaping life. It is not a rejection of ambition. It is not a condemnation of success, wealth, relationships, or achievement. This journey is far more subtle. Because the problem has never been the world itself. The problem may be the way we relate to it. The problem may be the expectations we place upon it. The problem may be that we ask the external world to provide something only inner understanding can reveal. And if that is true, an entirely new possibility emerges. A possibility hidden in plain sight. A possibility that has been quietly waiting beneath every experience you have ever had. There is a reason the wisest individuals throughout history repeatedly pointed inward. Not because they wished to escape reality, but because they discovered something astonishing. They discovered that the treasure human beings seek through achievement, possession, recognition, and endless striving cannot be found in those places. Not permanently. Not completely. The real treasure exists in another dimension altogether. A dimension closer than thought. Closer than desire. Closer than identity. A dimension that most people overlook precisely because it is so near. Yet before that treasure can be discovered, a great illusion must first be understood. The illusion that fulfillment exists somewhere else. Tomorrow. Later. After success. After recognition. After one more achievement. After one more victory. After one more horizon. This illusion drives entire lives. Entire cultures. Entire civilizations. And until it is seen clearly, the search continues. As you move through this book, do not rush. These chapters are not meant to be consumed. They are meant to be experienced. Pause when a story speaks to you. Reflect when a question unsettles you. Pay attention when something feels familiar. Because the most important discoveries will not come from the words themselves. They will come from what the words awaken inside you. Again and again, you will encounter a recurring invitation. Observe. Observe your desires. Observe your fears. Observe your ambitions. Observe your assumptions. Observe the endless movement of the mind. Because observation is the doorway. And once that doorway opens, a remarkable journey begins. A journey not toward becoming someone else, but toward discovering who you have always been. There is a hidden garden within every human being. A place untouched by fear. Untouched by comparison. Untouched by success and failure. Untouched by the endless noise of the world. Most people spend their entire lives searching for that garden in distant places. This book is an invitation to stop searching long enough to notice it. If you are willing to look honestly, if you are willing to question deeply, if you are willing to follow the clues hidden throughout these pages, you may discover that what you have been seeking has never been far away. In fact, it may be closer than your next thought. And that is where our journey begins. Chapter 1. The Vessel That Never Fills. There is a question hiding beneath almost every human life. A question so quiet that most people never hear it directly. Yet it shapes careers, relationships, ambitions, fears, purchases, dreams, and even identities. The question is simple. When will it finally be enough? Most people never ask it aloud. Instead, they spend their entire lives trying to answer it through action. One more promotion. One more achievement. One more relationship. One more investment. One more milestone. One more victory. And somewhere in the distance, always shimmering like sunlight on the horizon, appears the promise that fulfillment is waiting just a little farther ahead. But there is something strange about that horizon. Every time we move toward it, it moves away. And that is where our story begins. Not in a palace. Not in a temple. Not in a distant age. But inside the invisible architecture of the human mind itself. Because hidden within each of us is a vessel unlike anything else in existence. And until we understand its nature, we remain trapped inside a race that has no finish line. Imagine a great city awakening before sunrise. Streetlights still glow against the fading darkness. Coffee shops begin opening their doors. Subway trains start carrying people toward destinations they have been pursuing for years. Some are chasing wealth. Some are chasing recognition. Some are chasing security. Others are chasing love. The details differ. The movement is the same. Everyone is heading somewhere. Everyone believes something important is waiting ahead. And yet, if you look closely, an unusual pattern begins to emerge. The executive finally receives the position he spent a decade pursuing. For a few days, perhaps a few weeks, excitement fills his world. Then something unexpected happens. The mind adjusts. What once felt extraordinary becomes normal. A new target appears. The chase resumes. A young entrepreneur dreams of reaching a certain financial milestone. She imagines the freedom it will bring, the peace, the certainty, the satisfaction. Years later, she arrives. For a brief moment, triumph floods her heart. Then another number appears on the horizon, and the old restlessness quietly returns. Again, and again, and again. Most people never notice this pattern. But once you see it, it becomes impossible to ignore. The destination changes. The feeling does not. Why? What force keeps moving the finish line? What mechanism inside human experience transforms every achievement into merely another starting point? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Maybe we simply have not achieved enough yet. Maybe we have not found the right relationship. Maybe we have not discovered our true purpose. Maybe the next breakthrough will finally complete us. This belief drives entire civilizations. Yet there is one problem. Human beings have been testing this theory for thousands of years. And the evidence tells a very different story. Long ago, according to an old tale, a traveler arrived at the gates of a powerful kingdom. He carried almost nothing. No wealth. No possessions. No signs of status. Only a small bowl in his hands. When he approached the ruler, he made a simple request. "I seek a gift." The ruler laughed warmly. His treasury overflowed with riches. Granting a gift to a traveler seemed effortless. "Ask for whatever you desire." The traveler nodded. "There is only one condition. My bowl must be completely filled. I will not leave with it partially full." The request sounded harmless. Almost amusing. The ruler agreed immediately. But the traveler smiled in a way that unsettled those standing nearby. Before anyone could ask why, the experiment began. Precious jewels were brought from the treasury. The first handful disappeared into the bowl. Yet the bowl remained empty. More jewels were added. Nothing changed. More. Still empty. Hour after hour, treasure poured into the vessel. The pile of riches surrounding it diminished. The bowl remained unchanged. As if everything placed inside simply vanished. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. Concern spread across the palace. Something impossible was happening. The ruler ordered even greater treasures to be brought. Rare gems. Gold. Objects collected across generations. Everything disappeared. The bowl remained unfilled. Finally, exhausted and bewildered, the ruler turned to the traveler. "What kind of vessel is this?" The traveler looked into the ruler's eyes. Then he revealed the secret. "This bowl was crafted from a human skull." Silence fell. And with that single sentence, the entire mystery changed shape. Because the traveler was not speaking about a bowl. He was speaking about the human mind. The story survives because it points toward a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The mind does not experience satisfaction the way we assume it does. It experiences adaptation. Whatever enters it becomes normal. Whatever becomes normal loses its power. Whatever loses its power creates a new desire. And so the cycle continues. Not because we are broken. Not because success is meaningless. But because the mind was never designed to create lasting fulfillment through accumulation. This realization is both disturbing and liberating. Disturbing because it challenges almost everything society teaches us. Liberating because it explains a frustration millions secretly carry. Perhaps the problem was never that you failed. Perhaps the problem was that you expected the mind to perform a task it was never built to perform. And that changes everything. Look carefully at modern life. People have more information than any generation in history. More technology. More convenience. More entertainment. More opportunities. Yet anxiety continues rising. Stress continues rising. Burnout continues rising. Loneliness continues rising. How can abundance increase while peace decreases? The answer hides beneath the surface. Most people are attempting to solve an inner challenge using external tools. They are trying to fill an invisible vessel with visible objects. They are searching for completion through accumulation. Yet the vessel itself remains unchanged. This is why two people can achieve identical success and experience entirely different realities. One finds gratitude. The other finds emptiness. One discovers freedom. The other discovers a larger prison. The external circumstances may be similar. The inner relationship is not. And that distinction is far more important than most people realize. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when a person begins to suspect something. Not understand it fully. Not prove it. Simply suspect it. A subtle feeling emerges. Perhaps what I have been chasing is not what I truly need. Perhaps the answer is not farther away. Perhaps it is hidden in an entirely different direction. This suspicion often arrives quietly. Late at night after achieving a goal. After purchasing something long desired. After receiving recognition. After finally reaching a milestone. Instead of permanent satisfaction, there is only a brief wave of pleasure. Then the familiar hunger returns. Many people ignore this moment. They rush toward the next target, the next distraction, the next promise. But a few pause, and those few begin asking questions. Questions that eventually transform their lives. Questions that cannot be answered by money alone, or achievement alone, or status alone. Questions about meaning. Questions about peace. Questions about fulfillment. Questions about who they are beneath all their pursuits. And surprisingly, this is where the real journey begins. Not when the vessel becomes full, but when we finally notice that it never does. The world teaches us how to acquire. Rarely does it teach us how to understand the one doing the acquiring. The world teaches us how to move faster. Rarely does it teach us where we are actually going. The world teaches us how to build an impressive life. Rarely does it teach us how to inhabit that life peacefully. Yet somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the endless movement, beneath the constant pursuit, another possibility waits. A doorway hidden in plain sight. A path not outward but inward. And the moment a person realizes that endless accumulation cannot satisfy an endless vessel, something extraordinary begins to happen. For the first time, attention turns toward the one who has been chasing. Toward the architect of desire itself. Toward the mysterious inner landscape from which every longing emerges. And that discovery reveals a question far more important than how to get what we want. A question few people ever think to ask. If the mind cannot be filled, then what exactly is it searching for? The answer to that question opens the next door. And behind that door waits the first great misunderstanding that keeps humanity running in circles. A misunderstanding so common that most people never recognize it. Yet once seen, it can never be unseen. And that is where our journey truly begins. Chapter 2. The Journey That Never Ends. There is a strange irony hidden within the human story. We spend our lives searching for something that may already be closer than our own breath. Yet we search for it everywhere except where it can be found. This is not because we are foolish. It is because the mind is naturally fascinated by distance. It is enchanted by what appears far away. The distant mountain seems more beautiful than the valley beneath our feet. The next opportunity appears more exciting than the one already present. The future feels more promising than this moment. And because of this, humanity has become a civilization of seekers. Seeking more. Seeking farther. Seeking endlessly. But there is a question almost nobody asks. What if the very act of searching in the wrong direction is the reason we never arrive? An old tale tells of a remarkable moment in the history of the universe. Of course, it is only a story. But sometimes stories reveal truths that facts cannot. According to the tale, after creating humanity, The universe faced an unexpected dilemma. The creation was unlike anything that had come before. It possessed imagination, curiosity, ambition, restlessness, the ability to dream beyond what existed. And so the universe wondered, where can I hide the deepest truth so that it is not discovered too quickly? Suggestions came from every corner of existence. Hide it beyond the highest peaks. But the answer came immediately. One day they will climb those peaks. Another voice suggested, place it among the stars. The response was the same. Eventually they will reach the stars. Others proposed distant oceans, hidden caves, unknown worlds. Yet every location shared the same weakness. Human beings would eventually find them. Then a final suggestion emerged. A quiet suggestion. A brilliant suggestion. Hide it within them. And suddenly everything became clear. Because human beings would search continents before searching consciousness. They would cross oceans before crossing their own fears. They would study galaxies before studying themselves. They would spend fortunes exploring the outer world while ignoring the unexplored universe within. The story is fictional. But the insight is real. Perhaps the greatest treasure has always remained hidden in the last place most people think to look. This explains a mystery that follows countless lives. The harder people search externally for peace, the more elusive it often becomes. Not because achievement is wrong. Not because success is bad. Not because ambition should be abandoned. The problem is far more subtle. We ask external things to provide what only inner understanding can create. And external things were never designed for that job. Think about it. A person buys a larger home. For a moment, excitement appears. Then the excitement fades. Another goal emerges. Someone gains public recognition. For a brief period, they feel elevated. Then they begin worrying about losing it. Someone reaches financial freedom. Then anxiety finds a new disguise. The object changes. The mechanism remains. Few people realize what this truly means. The problem is not the destination. The problem is expecting arrival from movement alone. And that distinction changes the entire map of life. Yet this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because history has occasionally produced rare individuals who stepped outside the race. People who seemed immune to the hypnosis of endless pursuit. People who possessed a freedom that could not be purchased. One such figure appears in an ancient story. A man so unconventional that powerful rulers became curious about him. A man who owned almost nothing, yet seemed to lack nothing. While others spent their lives accumulating possessions, he appeared perfectly content beneath the open sky. While others chased status, he laughed at status. While others dreamed of conquest, he seemed already fulfilled. This man became known as Diogenes. And what happened when he met the most powerful conqueror of his era reveals something extraordinary about the human condition. At the same time Diogenes was resting peacefully beneath the sunlight, another man was moving across continents. Armies marched behind him. Flags flew above him. Entire nations trembled before him. His name echoed through kingdoms. His ambition appeared limitless. He was determined to conquer the known world. To him, every horizon represented another challenge. Another victory. Another achievement waiting to be claimed. His name was Alexander. And if Diogenes represented stillness, Alexander represented movement. If one embodied contentment, the other embodied desire. If one had nowhere to go, the other could never stop going. It was inevitable that their paths would eventually cross. When Alexander heard stories about the strange philosopher, curiosity pulled him toward the encounter. He expected wisdom, perhaps eccentricity, perhaps entertainment. What he did not expect was a mirror. Because sometimes the most dangerous person we can meet is someone who reflects our hidden assumptions back to us. When Alexander approached, he expected admiration. After all, kings were accustomed to admiration. Conquerors were accustomed to respect. Power usually creates obedience. But Diogenes responded differently. He looked at the ruler before him and saw something entirely different from what others saw. He did not see greatness. He saw exhaustion disguised as ambition. He saw longing disguised as conquest. He saw a man running toward a destination he had never examined. And so he asked a simple question. A question that sounded ordinary, yet contained enormous power. "What are you ultimately trying to achieve?" Alexander answered confidently. "First one kingdom, then another, then another, then eventually the entire world." The plan seemed obvious to him. Natural. Logical. Necessary. Diogenes listened patiently. Then asked, "And after that?" Alexander smiled. "After that, I will finally rest." Silence. A silence more powerful than any argument. Because hidden within that answer was an extraordinary contradiction. The purpose of the entire journey was rest. The purpose of endless striving was peace. The purpose of conquest was contentment. Yet peace itself was being postponed. Contentment itself was being delayed. Rest itself was being placed at the end of an endless road. And Diogenes immediately recognized the trap. The same trap millions still fall into today. The belief that life begins later. The belief that happiness comes after one more achievement. The belief that fulfillment waits somewhere beyond the next milestone. The belief that peace is a future event. But what if peace is not waiting at the end of the road? What if peace is the quality with which the road is traveled? Diogenes laughed gently. Not with mockery. With compassion. The kind of compassion one feels when watching someone search frantically for glasses already resting on their head. He said, "If rest is your destination, why not rest now?" The question sounds absurd at first. Almost childish. Yet beneath it lies a profound challenge. If the thing we ultimately want is inner peace, why do we continually postpone it? Why do we assume it must be earned through suffering? Why do we believe fulfillment exists only after enough victories? Most people never investigate these assumptions. They simply inherit them. And inherited beliefs often become invisible prisons. The walls cannot be seen, which makes them even harder to escape. Alexander could not accept the invitation. Not because it lacked wisdom, but because he had already invested too much of himself in the journey. His identity had become fused with movement. Stopping felt impossible. Turning back felt unthinkable. Continuing felt inevitable. How many people live exactly the same way today? They dislike their path. Yet continue. They feel exhausted. Yet continue. They no longer remember why they started. Yet continue. Not because the destination is clear, but because momentum has become stronger than awareness. And this is one of the most overlooked forces in human life. Many people are not being guided by purpose. They are being carried by momentum. There is a difference. A profound difference. One creates freedom. The other creates unconscious repetition. The story says that Alexander eventually continued his journey, and Diogenes remained where he was. One moved across the world. The other remained at rest. Yet there is a deeper layer hidden beneath the surface. Because this story is not actually about two men. It is about two forces living inside every human being. The part of us that constantly seeks more. And the part of us that longs to come home. The part that believes fulfillment lies ahead. And the part that quietly whispers that something essential already exists within. These two voices compete for our attention every day. Most people spend their entire lives listening to only one of them. And because of that, they miss a revelation that changes everything. A revelation that explains why so many successful people remain restless. Why so many accomplished people remain dissatisfied. Why so many people achieve their dreams only to discover another hunger waiting behind them. But before we can understand that mystery, we must first uncover something even deeper. We must examine the invisible machinery that creates desire itself. Because the next piece of the puzzle reveals why the mind continuously manufactures new destinations, and why freedom begins the moment we understand how that machinery works. And that is where the real investigation begins. Chapter 3. The Hidden Kingdom. Some truths are so simple that the mind overlooks them. Not because they are difficult, because they are too close. A fish may spend its entire life searching for water. Not because water is absent, because it is everywhere. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of human life is not that fulfillment is unavailable. Perhaps the tragedy is that it is hidden beneath everything we are already experiencing. Yet this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The legend says that after Alexander died, he found himself standing before a great river. A river separating one realm from another. A final crossing. The place where titles no longer mattered. Where armies could not follow. Where victories could not be displayed. Where wealth could not be carried. Only the traveler remained. Only consciousness crossed. The story says Alexander arrived first. And after some time he heard footsteps behind him. Then laughter. A familiar laughter. A laughter he had heard years earlier beneath the morning sun. He turned. And there was Diogenes. Walking with the same ease. The same freedom. The same strange joy. For a moment Alexander was stunned. Because everything the philosopher had predicted had happened. The conquest had remained incomplete. The journey had ended in the middle. The world had not been enough. And rest had never arrived. But pride survives longer than wisdom. Alexander laughed loudly and called out, "How wonderful that a king and a beggar should meet again!" Diogenes laughed even louder. Then he replied, "Yes, a king and a beggar have met again. But perhaps you are mistaken about who is who." Alexander fell silent. And Diogenes continued, "I am returning with everything. You are returning with nothing. I found what I was looking for. You spent your life looking. So tell me, who is truly rich?" Those words contain a mystery most people never explore. Because what exactly does it mean to possess everything? Surely Diogenes owned almost nothing. No palace. No army. No treasures. No kingdom. Yet perhaps there exists another kind of wealth. A wealth that cannot be counted. A wealth beyond possessions. A wealth beyond circumstances. A wealth beyond success itself. And if such wealth exists, discovering it may be the most important task in human life. Every person carries a hidden assumption. The assumption is rarely spoken, but it guides almost every decision. It says, something is missing. And because something appears missing, the search begins. A person seeks money. Another seeks recognition. Another seeks love. Another seeks power. Another seeks security. Another seeks spiritual experiences. The forms are different. The movement is the same. Everyone is trying to complete something. Everyone is trying to fill an invisible gap. Yet here is the strange part. Even when the desired object is obtained, the gap often remains. For a brief moment there is excitement, relief, pleasure. Then the old feeling quietly returns. The search resumes. The destination changes. The seeker remains the same. And this is where something important is happening beneath the surface. What if the gap was never created by the absence of something external? What if it exists because we have lost contact with something internal? This possibility changes the entire direction of the journey. Because if the problem is external, we must keep searching outward. But if the problem is internal, every outward search moves us farther away. This is why ancient wisdom traditions repeatedly point inward. Not because the outer world is wrong, but because fulfillment cannot be imported from outside. It must be discovered. There is a tremendous difference. One is acquisition. The other is awakening. Most people spend their lives mastering acquisition. Very few learn awakening. A story illustrates this beautifully. In a crowded city, there lived an old beggar. For decades he sat in the same place. Rain fell upon him. Seasons changed around him. People came and went. Years passed. He continued asking for coins. Day after day. Year after year. Eventually he died. When workers cleared the area where he had lived, they made an astonishing discovery. Beneath the ground lay a hidden cache of wealth. For decades the man had sat directly above treasure. Yet he lived and died as a beggar. Not because the treasure was absent. Because he never knew it was there. This story is not really about a beggar. It is about us. Because every human being possesses resources far greater than they imagine. Peace. Awareness. Love. Stillness. Clarity. Joy. They exist as possibilities within consciousness itself. But hidden treasure has no value until it is discovered. The question then becomes, why do we fail to notice it? Why do we continue looking elsewhere? The answer is surprisingly simple. Hope keeps pulling our attention outward. The next achievement. The next opportunity. The next success. The next relationship. The next breakthrough. The next destination. The promise always sounds convincing. The horizon always appears meaningful. And because of that, attention remains trapped outside. Most people never realize that hope itself can become a distraction. Not all hope. Only the hope that insists fulfillment exists somewhere else. Tomorrow. Next year. After success. After achievement. After arrival. But what if arrival is impossible for someone traveling in the wrong direction? This explains something curious about human behavior. As people grow older, many begin turning towards spirituality. The chase exhausts them. The attractions lose some of their power. The promises lose some of their magic. Suddenly questions arise. Questions that never seemed important before. What is the purpose of all this? Who am I beneath my achievements? What remains when everything else disappears? Yet even here another trap waits. Many people continue searching outward. Only the object changes. Instead of money, they seek salvation. Instead of status, they seek spiritual status. Instead of worldly success, they seek heavenly rewards. The search continues. Only the labels change. And that single realization changes everything. Because the problem was never what we were seeking. The problem was where we were seeking. The outer search is endless. There will always be another mountain. Another goal. Another horizon. Another promise. But there comes a moment when a person finally sees the pattern. Not intellectually. Existentially. They see that no destination can provide what they truly long for. And in that moment, attention begins to turn. Not because someone commands it. Not because a philosophy persuades it. But because the illusion loses its power. The eyes naturally move toward what is real. And that is where the true journey begins. Not the journey across the world. The journey into the hidden kingdom within. Yet before we can enter that kingdom, we must understand the force that keeps pulling us away from it. A force so subtle that most people never notice it. A force that quietly shapes every desire, every ambition, and every dream. And what we discover next will completely transform the way we understand the human mind. Chapter 4. The Weight of the Golden Brick. There is a difference between carrying something in your hands and carrying it in your mind. Most people understand the first. Very few understand the second. A traveler may put down a heavy suitcase and feel relief immediately. But how does one put down an idea? How does one put down an attachment? How does one put down a fear? That is a far more difficult task. Because physical burdens are visible. Psychological burdens are invisible. And what remains invisible often governs our lives. This is where another hidden misunderstanding begins to reveal itself. Many people believe they are trapped by circumstances, by possessions, by relationships, by responsibilities, by success, by failure. But what if these things are not the real chains? What if the real chain is simply the meaning we assign to them? What if the prison exists not in the object itself, but in the importance we have attached to it? This possibility changes everything. Because if bondage exists in the object, then we must escape the object. But if bondage exists in the mind, then escape becomes much more complicated. A person can leave a city and carry the city within. A person can leave wealth and still remain obsessed with wealth. A person can leave a relationship and continue living inside it for years. The body moves. The mind remains. And that is where the real story begins. An old story illustrates this beautifully. One evening, an elderly wanderer and his young companion were crossing a dense forest. The sun was beginning to disappear behind the trees. Shadows stretched across the path. Birdsong faded into silence. Night was approaching. As they walked, the older traveler suddenly asked a surprising question. "Is this forest safe?" The young man looked at him with confusion. In all their years together, he had never heard such a question. They had crossed mountains, walked through storms, slept beneath open skies, entered unfamiliar territories. Yet never had his teacher spoken of fear. Something felt different. Something hidden was happening beneath the surface. But the young traveler remained silent. He simply continued walking. A little later they stopped beside a well. The older man handed his travel bag to his companion. "Hold this for a moment while I wash." The young traveler accepted the bag. As he held it, curiosity arose. The fear. The anxiety. The unusual questions. They all pointed towards something. Carefully he opened the bag. Inside he discovered a solid brick of gold. Suddenly everything made sense. The fear was not about the forest. The fear was not about the darkness. The fear was not about getting lost. The fear was about losing something valuable. The object had changed. The mind had changed with it. The young traveler smiled quietly. He removed the gold brick, placed it beside the path, then replaced it with an ordinary stone of similar size. When the older traveler returned, he took the bag without noticing. And the journey continued. Not long afterward, the questions returned. "Are we close to the village? Could there be danger ahead? Do you know the way well?" The young traveler finally laughed. "Do not worry," he said. "The danger has already been left behind." The older man stopped. His hand rushed into the bag. His fingers searched frantically. The gold was gone. Only a stone remained. For a moment he stood frozen. Then something unexpected happened. He began to laugh. Not a forced laugh. A genuine laugh. The laugh of someone suddenly seeing himself clearly. The fear disappeared instantly. The anxiety vanished. The urgency evaporated. The forest remained exactly the same. The darkness remained exactly the same. The path remained exactly the same. Only one thing had changed. Meaning. And with that change, the entire experience transformed. This story reveals something profound about human psychology. The forest never created the fear. The gold did. More precisely, the value assigned to the gold did. The object itself was innocent. The attachment created the burden. This is one of the most important insights on the inner journey. Objects do not imprison us. The meaning we attach to them does. A house is simply a structure. Money is simply paper or numbers. Recognition is simply an opinion. power is simply a social agreement. Yet human beings transform these things into sources of identity. And once identity becomes involved, fear is born. Because whatever defines us can also be lost. And whatever can be lost becomes a source of anxiety. Most people never notice this mechanism. They blame the forest. They never examine the gold brick hidden in their bag. Yet this is where the story becomes even more interesting. When some people discover that attachment creates suffering, they immediately choose another extreme. Instead of chasing wealth, they run from it. Instead of pursuing power, they reject it. Instead of seeking relationships, they avoid them. But notice carefully. The object still controls them. Only the direction has changed. A person obsessed with money and a person obsessed with avoiding money may appear different. But inwardly they remain connected to the same idea. One is running toward it. The other is running away from it. Yet both are being controlled by it. Few people realize what this truly means. Running away can be another form of attachment. Fear is simply attachment wearing a different mask. And that realization changes the entire picture. Look closely at the world. There are people chasing success. And there are people rejecting success. There are people pursuing recognition. And there are people proudly announcing they do not care about recognition. There are people seeking influence. And there are people constantly proving they want none. Yet both groups often remain psychologically tied to the same things. One clings. The other resists. But both remain connected. True freedom is neither clinging nor resisting. True freedom is seeing clearly. When something loses its imagined importance, both pursuit and avoidance disappear naturally. No struggle is required. No discipline is required. No dramatic sacrifice is required. Understanding alone transforms the relationship. This is why genuine inner transformation is so rare. Because most people simply exchange one attachment for another. One identity for another. One prison for another. They change costumes. The actor remains the same. The person who once boasted about wealth now boasts about simplicity. The person who once displayed luxury now displays spirituality. The symbols change. The psychology remains. And because the psychology remains, suffering continues. Perhaps in a different form. But it continues. The real revolution happens somewhere deeper. Not in what we possess. Not in what we reject. But in the way we see. Imagine someone who closes their eyes every time they encounter temptation. Many would call that strength. But is it? Or is it fear? If a person must continually escape from something, has freedom truly been achieved? Or has the prison simply become invisible? The real challenge is not removing every object from the world. The real challenge is understanding the mind that gives those objects power. Because the source of bondage is never outside. The source always lies within awareness itself. Until that is understood, people continue moving between attraction and avoidance. Between desire and fear. Between grasping and escaping. And they call this movement spiritual progress. Yet the deeper truth remains unseen. A truly free person neither chases nor flees. They do not worship the world. Nor do they condemn it. They simply see it clearly. And when clarity arrives, attachment begins to dissolve on its own. The gold brick becomes a stone. The burden disappears. The forest becomes peaceful again. The night becomes beautiful again. Nothing outside changes. Everything inside changes. And that is the beginning of a completely different way of living. But before we can understand that freedom fully, we must investigate a deeper question. Why does the mind create attachments in the first place? What is it truly searching for behind every possession, every ambition, every fear, and every desire? Because hidden beneath all attachments lies a single longing. A longing so fundamental that it quietly shapes the entire human experience. And discovering it reveals the next great secret of the inner kingdom. Chapter 5. When Gold Becomes Dust. There is a remarkable difference between abandoning something and understanding it. From the outside, the two may appear identical. A person leaves wealth. A person leaves status. A person leaves possessions. A person leaves ambition. Observers applaud. They call it sacrifice. They call it renunciation. They call it spirituality. But appearances are often deceptive. Because the question is not whether something has been left behind. The real question is, has it lost its power over the mind? This distinction is subtle. Yet it separates imitation from transformation. And very few people ever discover the difference. Imagine an elderly couple living on the edge of a forest. They own almost nothing. No savings. No property. No hidden fortune. Each morning they gather fallen wood from the forest. Each evening they sell it in a nearby village. Whatever money arrives is enough for a simple meal. Whatever remains is shared with others. Then they sleep. And the next day the cycle begins again. Simple. Ordinary. Almost invisible. Yet sometimes the greatest wisdom hides inside ordinary lives. One year, heavy rain arrived unexpectedly. One day. Then another. Then another. The forest became inaccessible. The roads disappeared beneath mud. The old couple could not work. Their small supply of food vanished. They endured hunger. Then more hunger. For long days passed. When the sun finally emerged, they returned to the forest. Weak. Exhausted. Hungry. With great effort they gathered wood and began the long walk home. The husband walked ahead. His wife followed a short distance behind. Then something happened. Something that would reveal a truth far greater than either of them expected. Along the side of the path lay a small leather pouch. Partially open. Inside were gold coins. Some had spilled onto the ground. Others remained hidden within the bag. The old man froze. Immediately thoughts rushed through his mind. Not because he wanted the gold. At least, that is what he believed. For many years he had considered himself free from greed. He had convinced himself that wealth no longer tempted him. Yet as he stared at the coins, another thought appeared. What if my wife sees them? What if her mind becomes attached? What if desire awakens in her? Instantly he became concerned. Not about himself. About her. Or so he thought. Quickly he dug a small hole beside the path. He pushed the pouch into the earth, covered it with soil, and tried to erase all evidence before she arrived. But life has a curious sense of humor. Just as he finished covering the gold, his wife reached him. She watched him brushing dirt from his hands. "What are you doing?" she asked. The old man hesitated. A difficult situation had appeared. He had spent years cultivating honesty. Now honesty trapped him. If he told the truth, he would reveal exactly what he had hoped to hide. If he lied, he would betray his principles. For a moment he stood between two discomforts. Finally he spoke. "I found a pouch full of gold. I buried it. I was afraid you might see it and become tempted. I have overcome such things, but I worried about you." He expected gratitude. Perhaps admiration. Maybe even respect. Instead, his wife began laughing. Not a polite laugh. A genuine laugh. The kind that appears when someone sees through an illusion. The old man looked puzzled. "What is so funny?" The woman shook her head. Then she said something extraordinary. "You still see gold. And you still see dirt. Otherwise, why would you be burying one beneath the other?" The old man fell silent. Because in a single sentence she had exposed something he had not seen. He believed he had transcended wealth. Yet wealth still occupied his consciousness. He still assigned importance to it. He still believed it possessed power. Otherwise, why hide it? Why fear it? Why protect someone from it? The object remained alive within his mind. And that changed everything. This is one of the most misunderstood truths on the spiritual journey. Avoidance is not freedom. Fear is not freedom. Suppression is not freedom. Freedom arrives only when something loses its psychological significance. A child treasures a toy. Years later, the same toy means nothing. Not because the child renounced it. Because understanding evolved. Interest disappeared naturally. No struggle was necessary. No discipline was required. No sacrifice was involved. The relationship simply dissolved. The toy remained. The attachment vanished. This is how genuine transformation happens. Not through force. Through insight. Many people spend their lives trying to renounce things. Yet what they renounce externally often survives internally. A person leaves wealth but dreams about wealth. A person leaves status but secretly desires recognition. A person abandons possessions but becomes proud of simplicity. The costume changes. The actor remains. And because the actor remains, suffering continues. Perhaps in a different form. But it continues. Few people realize what this truly means. The opposite of attachment is not rejection. The opposite of attachment is understanding. And understanding has a unique power. It dissolves what effort can never destroy. The elderly woman understood something profound. Gold had not become meaningless because it was buried. Gold becomes meaningless when consciousness awakens. Then gold is simply metal. Praise is simply sound. Criticism is simply sound. Success is simply an event. Failure is simply an event. The mind stops projecting enormous significance onto things. And when significance dissolves, freedom appears. Naturally. Effortlessly. Like a knot untangling itself. Yet this raises a deeper question. Why are human beings so fascinated by accumulation? Why do we continue believing that one more achievement, one more possession, one more victory will complete us? The answer lies in a misunderstanding so ancient that almost everyone inherits it. We imagine that something external can fill something internal. We imagine that what is outside us can complete what feels incomplete inside us. But can it? Pause for a moment and consider this carefully. If the emptiness is within, how can anything outside enter it? A larger house remains outside. More money remains outside. More recognition remains outside. More possessions remain outside. Everything we accumulate belongs to the external world. Yet the longing we are trying to satisfy exists within consciousness itself. How can one dimension solve the problem of another? This is where the entire pursuit begins to unravel. Imagine standing beside a well. You are thirsty. Yet instead of lowering a bucket into the water, you begin decorating the stones around the well. You polish them, arrange them, expand them, beautify them. Years pass. The well looks magnificent. But your thirst remains. That is how many lives are lived. The inner thirst remains untouched while endless energy is spent rearranging externals. The decorations become impressive. The emptiness remains. And because the emptiness remains, the search continues. One more achievement. One more possession. One more destination. One more promise. The cycle repeats endlessly. This is why true spirituality begins not with belief, but with observation. Not with rituals. Not with symbols. Not with labels. Observation. Simple, honest observation. Look at life. Look at the people around you. Look at history. Look at yourself. Observe without condemnation. Observe without judgment. Observe without trying to force a conclusion. Just see. What happens when people get what they want? How long does satisfaction last? What becomes of their next desire? What becomes of their next pursuit? What becomes of their next dream? If we observe carefully, life begins revealing its secrets. Not through philosophy. Through direct experience. And that is where a profound shift begins. Because the moment we stop blindly chasing and start deeply observing, something remarkable happens. The illusion begins to weaken. The spell begins to break. And for the first time, we become capable of seeing life exactly as it is. But before that vision becomes clear, we must investigate one final obstacle. A hidden force that constantly prevents honest observation. A force so common that most people mistake it for reality itself. And until it is understood, the mind continues running in circles, chasing reflections while the real treasure waits quietly within reach. Chapter 6. The Horizon That Moves Away. There is a question hidden beneath every ambition. A question so uncomfortable that most people never ask it. Not because the answer is difficult. Because the answer threatens the entire structure of the chase. The question is this: what happens if I finally get everything I want? Most people assume the answer is obvious. Peace. Fulfillment. Completion. Arrival. Yet history tells a very different story. Again and again, human beings reach the goals they once believed would transform their lives. And then something unexpected happens. The transformation never arrives. Or if it arrives, it stays only briefly. Then the old restlessness returns. A new desire appears. A new destination emerges. A new horizon begins calling. And the journey starts again. This pattern is so common that most people no longer notice it. Yet once it is seen clearly, it becomes impossible to ignore. Many years ago, one of the wealthiest men in the world lay approaching the end of his life. His name had become synonymous with success. Factories. Businesses. Influence. Fortunes beyond imagination. The kind of life millions dream about. A writer who had spent years studying him asked a simple question. You must feel satisfied. After all, you created extraordinary wealth through your own efforts. The old businessman looked at him and shook his head. No. I am a failure. The writer was stunned. A failure? How could a man surrounded by unimaginable riches call himself a failure? The answer revealed something profound. The businessman explained that he had hoped to accumulate far more than he actually possessed. The target he had set for himself remained unfinished. The dream remained incomplete. The goal had moved beyond reach. And so, despite everything he had achieved, he felt unsuccessful. This should surprise us. But it rarely does. Because deep down, we recognize the pattern. We have seen it everywhere. A student wants to graduate, then wants a career, then wants advancement, then wants recognition, then wants freedom, then wants security. The milestones change. The movement remains identical. Every achievement creates a brief sense of victory. Then the mind quietly creates another destination. The race continues. Few people realize what this truly means. The problem is not that goals are reached. The problem is that desire evolves faster than achievement. The moment one mountain is climbed, another appears. And often the new mountain looks even more important than the previous one. Imagine trying to reach the horizon. At first it seems possible. The line appears visible, clear, definite. It looks as if the sky touches the earth just a few miles away. So you begin walking. Hours pass. The horizon remains. You continue. Days pass. The horizon remains. Years pass. The horizon remains. Not because you are failing. Because the horizon was never a destination. It was an appearance. An illusion created by perspective. The closer you move toward it, the farther it moves away. Human desire often operates in exactly the same way. We believe fulfillment exists just beyond the next accomplishment. Yet each accomplishment simply creates another horizon. The destination shifts. The longing survives. And because the longing survives, the pursuit never ends. This is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because most people blame themselves. They think they have not achieved enough, worked enough, accumulated enough, become enough. But what if the issue is not personal inadequacy? What if the structure of desire itself contains a misunderstanding? What if the horizon was never meant to be reached? That possibility changes everything. Because it suggests that the problem is not how fast we are moving. The problem is the direction of our attention. And before we can understand that, we need to uncover something even deeper. There is an old children's tale about a young girl who entered a magical kingdom. She had traveled a great distance. She was hungry, tired, exhausted. As she wandered through this strange world, she noticed something wonderful. Not far away stood a queen beneath a tree. In her hands were trays filled with fruit and food. The queen smiled warmly and called the girl forward. The distance appeared small. Just a short run. A few moments at most. The girl immediately began moving toward her. But something strange happened. After several minutes of running, the queen remained exactly as far away as before. The girl ran faster. Still the distance remained unchanged. The queen continued smiling, continued waving, continued calling her closer, yet somehow never became closer herself. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The girl became tired, confused, frustrated. Several times she stopped and looked carefully. Each time the same mystery remained. The distance never changed. Eventually she shouted, "What kind of place is this? I have been running all day. Why am I not getting closer?" The queen laughed, then replied with words that sounded absurd. "This is not unusual. Most people spend their entire lives doing exactly the same thing." The girl did not understand. Neither do most adults. At least not immediately. Because the story is not about distance. It is about desire. The queen represents fulfillment. The running represents ambition. And the unchanged distance represents the experience of countless human beings. Always approaching. Never arriving. Always hoping. Never completing. Always becoming. Never being. What happens next reveals a truth most people spend their entire lives missing. The girl finally collapsed from exhaustion. The day was ending. The sky darkened. The queen remained exactly where she had been in the morning. No closer. No farther. The distance had not changed at all. And suddenly the absurdity became visible. The running had accomplished nothing. Not because effort was wrong, but because effort was directed toward an illusion. And that single realization changes everything. Because much of human life operates according to the same principle. We assume movement automatically creates fulfillment. Yet movement and fulfillment are not the same thing. A person can travel the entire world and remain internally lost. A person can accumulate extraordinary wealth and remain inwardly poor. A person can achieve fame and remain unknown to themselves. The outer journey and the inner journey are different dimensions. And confusing them creates endless suffering. This is why observation becomes so important. Not belief. Not ideology. Not tradition. Observation. The ability to look carefully. The ability to see what is actually happening. Most people are too busy pursuing the next destination to observe the pattern itself. They remain hypnotized by motion. The next promotion. The next relationship. The next opportunity. The next breakthrough. The next victory. Yet there is a hidden reason most people never notice. The mind fears observation. Because observation threatens illusion. The moment we begin looking carefully, many cherished assumptions start collapsing. And the ego prefers comforting dreams to uncomfortable truths. Real spirituality begins exactly here. Not with closing the eyes, but with opening them. Not with escaping life, but with examining it. Not with rejecting facts, but with understanding them. Many people believe spirituality means withdrawing from reality. The opposite is true. Reality is the doorway. Facts are the doorway. Experience is the doorway. Truth hides within what is, not within what we wish existed. A person who closes their eyes may escape confusion temporarily, but confusion remains untouched. Only observation can dissolve it. Only seeing clearly can transform it. Yet observation requires a special quality of mind. A mind free from prejudice, free from conclusions, free from predetermined answers. Because the moment we begin looking through beliefs, we stop seeing reality. We see only our interpretations. This is one of the greatest obstacles to awakening. People rarely see what is. They see what they expect, what they fear, what they hope, what they have been taught. And then they mistake those images for reality. But reality waits patiently behind all projections, waiting to be seen directly, waiting to be encountered without distortion, waiting to reveal a secret that changes the entire human journey. Because once observation becomes pure, another extraordinary discovery begins to emerge. A discovery about the observer himself, the one who desires, the one who fears, the one who chases horizons, the one who never feels complete. And until we understand that observer, the mystery of human suffering remains unsolved. The next step of our journey takes us directly into that mystery. And what we find there may be the most important revelation of all. Chapter 7. The King Who Wanted to Leave. There are moments in life when a single observation reveals more than years of study. A single insight. A single glimpse. A single moment of seeing clearly. And suddenly an entire illusion collapses. What books could not teach. What arguments could not prove. What beliefs could not establish. Reality reveals directly. And once reality is seen, it becomes impossible to return completely to ignorance. This chapter begins with such a moment. A moment when a young man saw through an entire kingdom. Long ago, a student completed his years of learning and prepared to leave his teacher. The day of departure arrived. Friends and fellow students offered gifts. Some offered coins. Some offered clothes. Some offered small tokens of gratitude. But the young man possessed nothing. No money. No property. No inheritance. Nothing at all. As he bowed before his teacher, tears fell onto the ground. His teacher looked at him gently. "Why are you crying?" the young man replied. "Everyone brings you a gift. I have nothing. You gave me food when I was hungry. You sheltered me. You educated me. Everything I possess came from you. I cannot even offer gratitude properly." Then he made a request. "Promise me something. If one day I become capable of bringing you a gift, you will accept it." The teacher smiled. "There is no gift greater than love. There is no offering greater than sincerity." But the young man insisted. And finally the teacher agreed. The promise was made. The student left. Yet the promise remained alive inside him. That very evening he arrived in the capital city and stayed with an old friend. Though exhausted from travel, sleep would not come. He tossed and turned throughout the night. His friend finally asked, "What troubles you?" The young man explained. His teacher's kindness. His inability to offer anything in return. His longing to bring even a small gift. Then he said something revealing. "If only I could somehow obtain a few gold coins. Just a few. That would be enough." His friend laughed. "You worry about something simple." Then he told him about an unusual custom. The king of that land had made a public vow. The first person who approached him each morning with a request would receive whatever he asked for. "Go early," You only need a few coins. Your problem will be solved. The young man finally relaxed. For the first time all day, he slept peacefully. Before sunrise, he arrived at the royal gardens. The gates were quiet. No crowds. No petitioners. No competitors. He stood alone. A little later, the king emerged for his morning walk. The young man immediately stepped forward. Your Majesty, I am the first petitioner. The king smiled warmly. Indeed you are. Then he added something unexpected. In fact, you are the first one ever. The young man looked surprised. The king nodded. People hear my promise. Yet nobody comes. Perhaps they do not believe it. But I assure you, whatever you ask I shall give. And then something remarkable happened. Only moments earlier the young man had wanted 5 gold coins. 5. A simple number. A simple request. But the instant he heard the words, whatever you ask, the number changed. 5 became 50. 50 became 500. 500 became 5,000. Then 50,000. Then 500,000. Then millions. Then more. The mind began racing faster than any horse. New possibilities appeared every second. Each larger than the previous one. Each making the previous number seem foolish. Why ask for 5 when 50 is possible? Why ask for 50 when 5,000 is possible? Why ask for thousands when kingdoms exist? The mind was doing what minds have always done. Expanding desire. Stretching expectation. Moving the horizon. And what happened next reveals something important about every human being. The king watched silently. Minutes passed. The young man's face became tense. The request was becoming impossible. Not because there was too little available. Because there was too much. Every choice created regret. Every number felt inadequate. Every possibility revealed a larger possibility. Finally the king said, It seems you need time. I will walk through the garden. When I return, give me your answer. The young man felt relieved. But only briefly. Because now he faced a deeper problem. He had reached the limits of his imagination. No matter what number he chose, another larger number immediately appeared. His mind had become a machine manufacturing dissatisfaction. And suddenly he understood something terrifying. Even if the king gave him everything he requested, a part of him would still wonder whether he should have asked for more. As the king's footsteps approached once again, panic grew. Then a final idea appeared. Why ask for a number at all? Why not ask for everything? The entire kingdom. Every palace. Every treasure. Every field. Every coin. Everything. The logic seemed perfect. At last there would be nothing left to regret. The king returned. The young man looked at him and said, I have decided. Leave with only the clothes you are wearing. Everything else belongs to me. He expected shock. Perhaps anger. Perhaps outrage. Instead, something entirely unexpected happened. The king raised his eyes toward the sky. And smiled. A smile of relief. A smile of gratitude. A smile so genuine that it frightened the young man. Then the king folded his hands and whispered, At last! For years I have been waiting for someone to ask. The young man stared in disbelief. The king continued, My son, if the clothes trouble you, I shall leave those too. I will walk away naked. So that you never regret receiving less than everything. And with that, the king began removing his royal garments. Suddenly the young man's confidence vanished. A strange fear entered him. Because he saw something he had not expected. He saw a man who was not attached to what everyone else desired. A man willing to leave behind unimaginable wealth without hesitation. Without sadness. Without resistance. Without regret. The young man became silent. Then he asked for more time. The king laughed gently. You may take all the time you wish. I spent my whole life thinking. You can do the same. But the young man was no longer interested in the kingdom. Something far more valuable had appeared before him. An insight. A revelation. A crack in the illusion. Because suddenly he understood. If a man who possessed everything was willing to abandon everything joyfully, then perhaps everything was not what it seemed. Perhaps wealth was not wealth. Perhaps power was not power. Perhaps possession was not fulfillment. Perhaps the king had searched thoroughly and discovered something disappointing. And if that was true, then maybe there was no reason to repeat the same experiment. Before the king completed his second walk through the garden, the young man had disappeared. Not because he was afraid. Because he had seen. And seeing changes everything. That is the essence of observation. Not belief. Not obedience. Not faith. Observation. The ability to learn from reality without needing to repeat every mistake personally. A wise person does not need to touch every flame to understand fire. He observes. He learns. He understands. The young man looked through the kingdom and saw the king. He looked through the king and saw a lifetime. He looked through a lifetime and saw a truth. And that truth saved him years of wandering. This is one of the greatest powers available to human beings. The ability to learn from the lives of others. History is filled with people who pursued wealth, power, fame, pleasure, achievement, influence. Yet where are the voices proclaiming complete fulfillment? Where are the individuals who can honestly say, I found exactly what I was looking for. I reached the end of desire. I became permanently satisfied through external achievement. The silence is remarkable. And silence itself becomes evidence. Because throughout history, countless people have searched outside. Yet not one has declared the search complete. Not one has said the horizon was finally reached. And that is where the investigation becomes truly fascinating. At the same time, another pattern appears. A smaller pattern. A quieter pattern. A pattern most people overlook. There have always been a few individuals who turned inward. Not many. Only a few. But those few consistently report something extraordinary. Peace. Freedom. Contentment. A joy not dependent upon circumstances. A richness untouched by loss. A fulfillment that does not require constant acquisition. Different cultures. Different languages. Different centuries. Yet the same discovery. Again and again. As though they were all describing different paths leading to the same hidden kingdom. This is why the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. One direction has been tested by billions. The other by only a few. Yet the results appear reversed. The crowded road rarely arrives. The quiet path repeatedly does. And that raises a profound question. If even one human being has discovered this inner treasure, then why not many more? If one consciousness can awaken, why not thousands? Why not millions? What exactly prevents humanity from making the same discovery? The answer lies in a hidden habit so ancient and so automatic that most people never notice it operating. A habit that quietly steals attention away from the inner kingdom every moment of every day. And until we understand that habit, the treasure may remain buried even while we stand directly above it. Chapter 8. The Garden Hidden Within. We have traveled a long way together. Through stories of kings and beggars. Through forests and horizons. Through desires and disappointments. Through gold bricks and empty vessels. And now we arrive at perhaps the most important question of all. If fulfillment truly exists within. If peace is not a fantasy. If freedom is not reserved for a chosen few. Then why have so few discovered it? The answer appears obvious at first. We assume that extraordinary people are simply different. Different minds, different souls, different destinies. We look at awakened beings and imagine they belong to another category of humanity, a category unavailable to us. And in doing so, we create distance where none exists. Yet this is one of the oldest illusions of the human mind. Because the moment we place wisdom beyond ourselves, we excuse ourselves from discovering it. The moment we declare someone special, we quietly decide that we are ordinary. And that decision becomes a prison. Consider a seed. A single seed buried in the earth. One day it breaks open. A green shoot appears. Life emerges. The seed becomes a tree. No one is surprised. Because the flowering of the seed was always hidden within its nature. But imagine if only one seed in an entire forest blossomed. The others might begin believing the flowering seed was unique, special, chosen, different. Yet the truth would be far simpler. The blossoming seed merely fulfilled its potential, and the possibility would remain alive in every other seed. This is how we misunderstand awakened human beings. When a Buddha awakens, when a Christ radiates compassion, when a Mahavira discovers inner freedom, when a Krishna expresses boundless joy, we imagine we are looking at exceptions. Perhaps we are not. Perhaps we are looking at possibilities. Possibilities that belong to every human being. And that changes everything. If one human being can discover peace beyond circumstances, then peace belongs to human nature. If one human being can discover love beyond fear, then love belongs to human nature. If one human being can discover freedom beyond desire, then freedom belongs to human nature. Otherwise, such discoveries could never occur. A tree cannot grow from a stone. A flower cannot emerge from empty space. What appears in one life must exist as potential in countless others. This is why the stories of awakened individuals matter. Not because they should be worshipped. Not because they should be imitated. But because they reveal what is possible. They are not monuments to admire. They are mirrors. And mirrors are meant to show us ourselves. Yet this is where humanity has often become confused. Instead of understanding the message, we begin worshipping the messenger. Instead of discovering the path, we build institutions around footprints. Instead of awakening, we organize belief. And something essential is lost. The world has accumulated many religions, many names, many labels, many identities. Yet labels have a strange effect on human beings. They divide. One person says, "I am this." Another says, "I am that." And suddenly separation appears. Boundaries emerge. Arguments begin. Conflict follows. The label becomes more important than the living truth it was originally meant to express. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. The finger pointing toward the moon becomes more important than the moon itself. The container becomes more important than what it contains. And eventually people begin defending containers while forgetting the treasure. Few people realize what this truly means. Anything that separates human beings from one another cannot lead them toward deeper unity. Anything that creates walls cannot reveal the indivisible. Anything that strengthens division cannot reveal wholeness. The path inward is not a movement toward separation. It is a movement toward connection. Yet this connection is not something we create. This is an important distinction. Many people imagine spirituality as building unity, as if unity must somehow be manufactured. But unity already exists. The ocean does not need to connect its waves. They are already connected. The sunlight does not need to unite its rays. They are already united. Likewise, consciousness itself is not divided in the way appearances suggest. The division exists mostly in thought, in identity, in belief, in the stories we tell ourselves. And when attention turns inward, something remarkable begins to happen. The illusion of separation starts dissolving. Not because someone teaches us unity. Because we directly experience it. And direct experience is far more powerful than belief. This is why the inward journey transforms everything. At first we think we are searching for peace. Then we discover something deeper. We are searching for ourselves. At first we think we are seeking freedom from suffering. Then we discover something deeper. We are seeking freedom from illusion. At first we think we are looking for meaning. Then we discover something deeper. We are looking for reality itself. And reality is always closer than we imagine. Closer than thought. Closer than desire. Closer than identity. Closer even than the search itself. Yet because our attention remains occupied by external pursuits, we rarely notice. The treasure waits patiently. The garden waits patiently. The inner kingdom waits patiently. Always present. Always available. Always overlooked. Throughout this journey we have repeatedly encountered the same truth from different angles. The vessel that cannot be filled. The horizon that cannot be reached. The gold that becomes dust. The king willing to abandon his kingdom. Every story has pointed toward the same insight. The external world cannot provide what only inner awakening can reveal. This does not mean the world is wrong. This does not mean achievement is wrong. This does not mean relationships, work, creativity, or success are wrong. Not at all. The problem begins only when we expect them to provide what they were never designed to provide. We ask them to remove an emptiness they cannot touch. And then we blame life when they fail. But life has never made that promise. The promise existed only in imagination. What happens when this misunderstanding finally disappears? Something extraordinary. The search relaxes. The struggle softens. The constant pressure to become someone else begins fading. For the first time, life is encountered directly. Without the endless demand that it complete us. Without the constant expectation that the next moment will save us. Without the exhausting chase after distant horizons. And in that relaxation, something unexpected appears. Joy. Not excitement. Joy. A quieter thing. A deeper thing. A joy not dependent upon outcomes. A joy that emerges naturally when resistance ends. And from that joy arises another gift. Love. Not possession. Not attachment. Not dependency. Love. The simple overflowing of a heart no longer trapped in scarcity. This is why genuine inner awakening never makes a person indifferent to the world. Quite the opposite. A person who discovers inner richness becomes a blessing to the world. Because whatever is discovered within naturally begins flowing outward. When fragrance appears inside a flower, it cannot remain imprisoned there. It spreads. When light is lit within a lamp, darkness around it is affected. When music arises within a musician, it fills the room. Likewise, when peace awakens within a human being, relationships change. Communities change. Actions change. The world touched by such a person changes. Not through effort. Through presence. Not through ideology. Through being. The awakened person does not escape life. They enrich it. And now we arrive at the threshold where every true journey ends and begins simultaneously. The threshold of direct experience. No book can cross it for you. No teacher can cross it for you. No philosophy can cross it for you. The door exists within your own awareness. The seed already exists. The potential already exists. The treasure already exists. Nothing needs to be imported. Nothing needs to be added. Only seen. Only recognized. Only awakened. And perhaps that is the most beautiful realization of all. You are not being asked to become something else. You are being invited to discover what has always been there. So let this not be the end of a book. Let it be the beginning of an observation. Look carefully. Look honestly. Look patiently. Watch the movement of desire. Watch the promises of the mind. Watch the horizons it creates. Watch the endless search for completion. And as you watch, something remarkable may begin happening. The observer will slowly separate from the chase. The illusion will begin losing its power. And beneath all the noise, a silent presence will reveal itself. A presence that has been waiting from the very beginning. A presence untouched by fear. Untouched by ambition. Untouched by success and failure. Untouched by time itself. And when that presence is finally recognized, the journey ends where it truly began. Within. May the hidden garden within you bloom. May the dormant seed awaken. May the fragrance already waiting in your depths rise into awareness. And may your life become not a search for truth, but an expression of it. The journey is complete. And the real journey begins now. Epilogue. #The Last Door. Perhaps nothing new has been added to you through these pages. Perhaps something has simply been removed. A misunderstanding. An illusion. A habit of looking too far away. For most of human history, people have searched for fulfillment beyond themselves. In distant achievements. In future victories. In possessions. In recognition. In promises that tomorrow would finally bring what today could not. Yet again and again, life whispers the same secret. What is essential cannot be found where it does not exist. The thirsty traveler cannot satisfy thirst by chasing mirages. And the heart cannot find lasting peace in places where peace was never meant to live. If there is one message hidden within this book, it is this. You are not incomplete. You are not missing some final achievement. You are not one success away from becoming whole. What you seek has not been absent, only overlooked. Like treasure beneath a forgotten house. Like a garden hidden behind an unopened gate. Like a melody waiting beneath the noise. The journey inward is not a journey of becoming. It is a journey of remembering. Remembering what ambition made us forget. Remembering what fear concealed. Remembering what was present before the search began. So when you close this book, do not carry its words. Carry its invitation. Observe. Watch the movements of the mind. Watch desire creating new horizons. Watch fear creating new prisons. Watch hope constantly postponing life until tomorrow. And in that watching, a different intelligence begins to awaken. A silent clarity. A stillness that cannot be purchased. A peace that does not depend upon circumstances. A joy that arrives without reason. One day, perhaps unexpectedly, you may discover that what you were searching for was never waiting at the end of the road. It was walking beside you the entire time. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice. And when that moment comes, the search ends. Not because you have reached the horizon, but because you have finally come home. May your life become a fragrance of awareness. May your heart become a source of peace. May the hidden seed within you blossom into its fullest expression. And may the light you discover within naturally illuminate the world around you. The door has always been open. Now you know where it is.